Hello, my friend. My name is Joe Bakmotsky. I am the founder of Power to Be Happy and also the author of Finding Hope in Times of Uncertainty, a guide to thriving in the challenging world of today. And listen, my friend, what wouldn't I give to just live a life where I don't have to worry about things going wrong? What wouldn't I give just to have a life where I wouldn't be freaking out about everyday things like aches and pains and just and loved ones and just what's going on with the world today? But it's hard, right? And I'd say personally that the more that you go through these challenging times, the more that you really experience like hardships, the more you tend to worry. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, I really believe that the more you struggle, the more you worry, because you have proof that really that things could go seriously wrong. Listen, like take my son's story of meningitis. You know, when he was 2 years old, he had this. He started having these seizures, and we ended up in the hospital. And I'll never forget the look on the paramedic's face as he was rushing towards him, and it's because we didn't know what was going on. We just kind of panicking. We didn't know, and they just rushed him through, and just our life changed because we were like in there with this whole medical team just looking after him, and he was unconscious, and they were trying to help him, and how we got after all of these hours transferred to this major hospital with the best specialists, looking after him. And, we were lucky. We were so incredibly lucky that he pulled through. And, and then even though after that we spent all these months on medication, and it was rough because we didn't know what was going on, and they had all these tests. At the end of it, we're incredibly blessed to be in a place where he's fine and he's doing okay. But it also made me and my wife, it made us freak out every single time he gets sick, and every time he comes up to us, like yesterday, and he said, well, I have a headache. I mean, we're just freaking out because instantly it just brings you back to those times where we were like, we didn't know what would happen. We were so afraid of losing him, and that's how life is sometimes. These worries, especially if you've been through the struggles, sometimes they are inevitable. We can't do anything about these worries coming up. But if you can't really stop your worries from coming up and really having them be a part of your life in some way, whether that's about your health, whether that's about your loved ones, whether that's about your livelihood, well, what can you do to deal with it in a way that really doesn't prevent you from living the life that you want, from living the life that you truly deserve, where you can be happy, where you can enjoy things in your life? Well, listen, I've got 3 ideas that I really want to share with you today that I hope might kind of really serve you about this. And the first one has to do with The Man in the High Castle. This is a book by Philip K. Dick that's been recently turned into a series. I don't know if I had the chance to see it, but basically what happens is that the story takes place in kind of alternate reality, right? It's kind of alternative history of, where the Nazis have won the Second World War. And so the story takes place there. And it's a fascinating story. I would encourage you to check it out if you have time. But what's really fascinating is the story develops, and it's pretty scary, right? About what would life look like in the United States if Nazis really truly had won the war. And the story goes on from there. But what I find so fascinating about that setup is it's so similar to us experiencing worry, in our own lives and how we deal with it. Because to me, worry is kind of like Man in the High Castle in the sense that it's an alternate reality, right? Because you're always worrying about what might happen, about all these horrible things that might never come to life and probably never will. All these horrible things that could go wrong. And all in my case, it could be about cancer coming back or whatever else it might be, right? All of these horrible things, we worry about them, but it's so vital to remember sometimes that these worries, they're not real. They exist in some kind of an imaginary future that in all likelihood might never even come true. So these worries are not real. It's alternate realities, right? But they're not real. They're not real life. And sometimes these worries seem so real that I think it's just so crucial to remind yourself and say, hey, this is an alternate story of how things might end up, but hopefully they never will. And we live with hope. I really believe in living with hope and hoping and knowing that things could go wrong. But it doesn't stop you from living the life that you and I have today. And being able to set those worries aside so they don't control you and your life. And that brings me to really the second idea that I wanted to talk to you about today, is that we want to be able, when we have worries and concerns and things that could just drive us insane sometimes, right? With all the stress of everyday life and the challenges and things that we don't want to happen and things we want to avoid. I want to talk about how to bring yourself into this moment, into the present moment right now. I want to share with you this exercise that I call the line of control, that I think can really serve you, because it's all about this exercise. It's all about really bringing yourself into the present moment and really separating what is it that you can control or influence in some way from what it is that you cannot. So now I want you to do this with me live right now if you can. Because I think that whenever you do this, at whatever point you have in your life, it can be so crucial to really put things into perspective. I know, I hate it when people say that to me. Well, you got to put things into perspective. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm hoping that this can serve you and help you in helping you do that. So please do this with me right now. What I would like you to do is imagine that there's a line going out from your forehead and extending forward and dividing the world in front of you into equal halves. And I want you to think of the left-hand side of what you've got going on the left. And I want you to think of all the things that you cannot control or influence in any way. This could be worries about your health. This could be worries about what might happen to your kids or your parents or your partner or whoever might be, or your friends that you care about. It might be your worries about your job or your business. It might be worries about the economy or politics, things that lie outside of your control, things that you cannot do anything about. Right? Things that do not depend on you. I want you to think of what that is in your life right now. And whenever you have a thought about something that is a worry or a fear or a concern, I want you to imagine what that is, think of it, and imagine that you can grab it. It's a thing you can grab and put it onto the left-hand side. Remember how we divided the world into two halves in front of you, I want you to imagine that you take that worry, take that thing and put it on the left-hand side. And think of as many of those things as you can right now. Something that is really bothering you today. Something that is really making your life difficult right now. Something that is maybe at the back of your mind. And you kind of can't stop thinking about it because it's always kind of there, just kind of pronging at you and just kind of eating away at you. What is that? What is that for you? So think of those things and put them mentally on the left-hand side. And now we can set it aside. And now we can focus and take your attention and switch it up and put it to the right. And now I would want you to think of the things that you personally could influence or change in some way. This might be to do with what you do each day in your job. This might be how you look after your health. This might involve how you are with your partner or with your loved ones or with your friends. This might be around, your hobbies or passions or interests. So think of some of those specific things that you might be doing today. Think of the things that you will be doing, in the next week. And think of those specific things and that you may not even fully control, but at least you have some level of influence. I want you to think of those specific things, like something that you will be doing today, something that you might be doing with your loved one, something that you might be doing for yourself because you feel like it. Think of those specific things. Imagine that you take those things, those ideas, those plans, and put them on the right-hand side. And what ends up happening when you put enough of those things there, this becomes the area of your life, the part of your life where you can focus on, right? Those things we looked at on the left, you can't change them. You cannot influence them. They exist. They might affect your life in some way. You'll never know. But what we want to be able to do is set them aside. It doesn't mean they will disappear. It doesn't mean they will never ever even happen. But we can set them aside and say, well, I'll worry about it later. And now you can focus your energy and focus your efforts on what is on your right-hand side, on the things that you can control, on the things that you could influence in some way. Because the truth is, when you do that, when you give yourself the freedom to do the things that you can influence, control, that you love, that you can immerse yourself in, that's when your worry gets pushed to the side. And you can do more of the things that you love, that with people that you ultimately care about. And that's what it's all about. Changing the focus of what you give your attention is where you're gonna move, is how you're gonna live, and it's gonna put you in the present, not into some non-existent future about where things could go horribly wrong, but it will anchor you in the time of today, where you can do things that are within your control. Because now that puts you in charge of your life again. And I think that's what it's all about. The third idea I have for you is, if you have a specific worry or concern or something that's really troubling you or just eating away at you right now, I want you to do a little exercise with me. And we're gonna work through it. We're gonna quickly workshop through it. This will only take 2 minutes of your time. If you have a chance, if there is something that is specific that's bothering you, I'd love for you to grab a piece of paper right now and a pen. And what we're gonna do is, when you have that, I want you to take that piece of paper, put it in front of you, and I want you to write down what is the big concern or the worry that you have in the middle? I want you to write that down. We're going to do this exercise called the outcome map. And I want you to write down all the things, all the possible kind of worries that you have around that. So, you know, for example, or possible things that, possible outcomes, possible things that could come out of it. I'll give you an example. So for me, I do this every time. For example, I go for my cancer checkup. You know, I write down that I'm gonna go and have my regular cancer checkup, and write down, well, what are the possible outcomes? How could possibly things work out? And well, in one case, you know, it's in this situation it's quite simple. If the cancer's not back, then, you know, I just go on with living my life. But then I have of course, my deepest worry is that, well, what if it's come back? Well, what's gonna happen then? And I find that one of the most disturbing things is that we don't really know what's gonna happen. This thing is gonna come, and you have no control over what's gonna happen or how things might turn out. And so sometimes it's better to put some shape around that, and for me to think, well, what am I gonna actually do? And for me, what it is, well, are there alternate treatment options? How can I ask my specialist about what that might look like? Can I do some research around it? Maybe I should just straight away I'll call my wife and let her know. I mean, I'm putting together a list of things in my head about what those things could be. And it's really important that you do it out on paper. You mean you could do this in your head, of course, but when you draw out the main worry, the possible outcomes, and it could be 3, 4, could be multiple things, and then think about what you're gonna do in each of those situations that can really help you, because it gets those worries out of your head and onto the paper in front of you, where you can look at it objectively, weigh it up, and decide what you are going to do next. And then the last thing I want you to do with this exercise, with the outcome map, when you have it in front of you, you have your worry, you have your possible outcomes, you have these things that you can do about it. I want you to decide, well, what is the one thing that you're going to do about this today? What is going to be the one thing? The one thing that you can do about this. It doesn't have to be some huge epic change. It doesn't have to be some massive thing. But what is the one thing you can do about it? Could you go and do research on a specific website? Can you call up a professional? Maybe you want to book an appointment. Maybe you want to talk to your partner or friend or loved one. What is the one thing you can do? Because it's so vital to look at your worries, bring them up in front of you, and then do something about it. Right? This is why I truly believe that worries, when we leave them when we leave them just to exist, and this is when they really get to you. They really start to just drive you insane, because they always exist as these vague shapes that take over your mind, and they don't really have boundaries, and you don't quite know what they look like or what they really lead to. But when you, first of all, when you can acknowledge them, these things, as really just alternate realities that might never even happen. When you first do that, and just, because that's what they are, really. They're just alternate realities that might never come to pass. Like just stories that sometimes get into your head that are not even real. Then, when you go through a process to separate what you can and cannot control, so that you can direct your energy and your efforts towards the things that you truly care about. And then ultimately, when you can take the worry that you have out of your head and put it in front of you and see what it looks like and what it could be and decide what's the one thing you can do about it, well, now you're in charge of your worries. You're taking control of your life again. And I think it's so crucial for us to do this because, like we talked about, worries are inevitable, but it's what we do with them in our own life that counts. My name is Joe Bakhmutsky. I hope that this has helped you in some way. If you have any questions or worries at all, feel free to get in touch and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.